My son leaned in and hissed it into my ear the second I crossed his doorstep. "Don't tell the neighbors you're my mother." He said it fast, barely moving his lips the way you swat a fly you would rather no one saw land. Then he straightened, waved at the man watering the lawn next door, and shoved my coat into the narrow closet by the door. Not the wide one. That one held their jackets and their polished shoes, the whole life they wanted the street to admire. My raspberry scones went onto the counter and stayed there, gluten and shame in a tin. His wife carved me down to a family friend before the wine had even breathed. Aunt One Neighbor decided patting my hand like a good dog. I swallowed it. I swallowed the guest towels folded on the guest bed in the guest room, the welcome card that stamped their borrowed name onto a house that has never once worn it. I dragged 2 aching knees across a whole country to be introduced as furniture, so I smiled. I poured their guests wine I did not like. I let them scrub me out of the story they told at that gleaming table. What none of them caught, because none of them ever truly listened, sat quiet in my purse the entire time. The deed. One name printed across the top of it. Not his. My name is Joelle Johnson. I am 64 years old, and for 40 of those years I taught people how to sing. Not the polished ones you hear on television. The scared ones. The ones who came to my studio with their shoulders up around their ears, certain they had no voice worth the air it would cost. I taught them how to breathe from the floor of themselves. I taught them that a voice is not a gift some people are handed and others are denied. A voice is a muscle. You train it, or you let it wither, and most people spend their whole lives letting it wither because someone once told them to be quiet. Dwayne was the first person who ever told me my own voice was worth training. I was 22 and singing in the back row of a church choir, put there because a woman had said kindly that I did not quite blend. Dwayne found me after the service and told me he had heard me under all the others, and that a voice like mine had no business hiding in a back row. He married me the next spring, and for the rest of his life he was the only audience I ever truly needed. He died 3 years before I flew to Tennessee, and for a long while after I could not sing at all, because the ear I had always sung for was gone. It was the students who brought the sound back to me. One girl in particular. She came to my studio at 16 sent by a mother who wanted her fixed, and she would not open her mouth for 6 weeks. And then one afternoon she did, and the note that came out was so pure and so frightened that I had to turn my back so she would not see me weep. That is the whole of the work. You do not hand anyone a voice. You give them permission to stop hiding the one they already carry. I know the sound of a lie. That is not a boast. It is the plain result of listening to human throats for 4 decades. When a person lies, the breath changes first. It climbs higher into the chest. The larynx tightens like a fist closing. The pitch lifts a hair, the vowels go thin, and a small catch appears just before the false word arrives, the way a singer clips a note they are afraid to hold. My students could never fool me, and neither, it turned out, could my own son. When Tobin whispered his ugly little sentence into my ear, I heard his throat close on the word mother. That was the first thing I noticed standing in the entry of the house I had paid for in full. Not the marble, not the art I did not recognize. The fear in his voice riding under the words like a current under ice. The flight from Oregon had taken most of a day. 2 planes and a taxi and a long wait at a gate where the coffee tasted like warm pennies. My knees had stiffened somewhere over Kansas and never forgave me. I had packed 1 small suitcase and the tin of scones, the ones Tobin used to eat 6 at a time when he was small enough to sit on the counter and swing his heels against the cabinet doors. I had also packed out of a habit older than his marriage, my little handheld recorder. For 40 years I recorded my students so they could hear themselves the way I heard them. It is one thing to be told your breath is climbing into your shoulders. It is another to hear it played back and finally believe it. That little machine had changed more frightened lives than any speech I ever gave. The habit never left me. Even in retirement I carried it the way some women carry a rosary, a small worn thing that fit the shape of my hand. It sat in the side pocket of my purse, no bigger than a deck of cards, and I did not think much of it that first night. I would think a great deal of it later. My knees had stiffened somewhere over the middle of the country, and never quite forgave me, and I had spent the last hour of the flight with my hand pressed to the tin of scones in my lap, as if warmth could keep them fresh across 3,000 miles. As if a boy who ate them 6 at a time still lived at the end of this journey. "Take your shoes off here," Tobin said, not looking at me. Marin just had the floors done. I bent and unzipped my walking shoes. The entry gleamed. There was a painting on the wall, all sharp angles and cold blue, and there was nowhere to set my coat except the closet he chose for me. Marin came in from the back of the house with a wine glass in one hand and her phone in the other. She wore the kind of smile that stops at the cheekbones and never reaches the eyes. "Joelle," she said. "Welcome. We weren't sure which flight you were on." "I texted the details yesterday," I said. "Right," she said, already turning away. "Well, it's a full weekend. We've got the neighborhood thing tonight. I hope that's all right." Tobin took my coat without a word and hung it in the narrow closet, the one by the door, the one with a single wire hanger and a vacuum cleaner. The wide closet stood open across the hall, full of wool and leather and shoes with red soles. I held the tin of scones against my chest like a hymnal. "Where should I put these?" I asked. "Oh, just leave them on the counter," Marin said. "We're doing gluten-free right now. The kids might want them." The kids were Colton and Piper Marin's two from her first marriage, 11 and 9, Tobin's stepchildren. They peeked around the corner, mumbled a greeting at the carpet, and vanished up the stairs. They had never once spoken to me on the phone, and somewhere in that quiet house, in a white bassinet that looked more like a piece of medical equipment than a crib, slept my granddaughter, Sadie, 5 years old, the only person in Tennessee who shared my blood and did not yet know to be ashamed of it. "Let me show you the guest room," Tobin said. "Not your room. Not stay as long as you like. The guest room." He led me down a hall past a door with the word office printed on a small brass plate and into a space that could have been any mid-range hotel. A bed, a luggage rack, a lamp, no books, no chair, on the nightstand a printed card, "Welcome guests," and below it the Wi-Fi, "Everly Estate 1. I read that card 3 times. My name is Johnson. So is Tobin's. So was his father's. Everly is Marin's family name, the name she carried before she married my son, and somehow it had climbed onto the front of this house and settled there like it owned the place. On the walk in, I had seen the brass plaque staked into the lawn. The Everly House, cut into metal, anchored in the ground, proud as a headstone. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and let my knees rest. Tobin hovered in the doorway. "Just try to relax tonight," he said. "It's mostly Marin's circle, you know? Doctors, people from the club." "Of course," I said. What I meant was I understand. I understand that I am not to speak too much, and I am not to say who I am, and I am to stand in the corner of my own house like a coat someone forgot to take home. He left, pulling the door gently shut. I sat alone in that blank room and opened my purse. The envelope was still there, soft at the corners from being carried. I slid the document out slowly. The deed, my name across the top in clean capital letters. Joelle Marie Johnson, sole owner. No second name under it. No bank, no Lynn, nothing but me. 3 years earlier, Tobin had called me late at night, his voice pitched high with a need he was trying to disguise as opportunity. His business had gone under. The bankruptcy was fresh, the credit ruined, and no lender in the country would give him a mortgage. But there was this house, he said. This perfect house in a neighborhood that was about to turn. If I could just buy it. Just for now. Just until he got back on his feet and bought it from me. "It's our family's future, Mom," he had said, and I had believed him because believing him was the oldest habit I owned. So I sold the bonds Dwayne and I had spent 30 years building. I added the life insurance money, the money that arrived after my husband died and sat in the bank, feeling like a betrayal every time I looked at it. I added most of my pension. $340,000 wired in full cash, no mortgage, no bank to answer to. I kept my little house in Oregon, the one with the garden Dwayne planted, because a woman needs somewhere to stand that no one can take. And I put my name, only my name, on the deed to the house in Franklin, because that is what you do when you buy a house with your own money. You put your name on it. I remember the night he called. I remember it the way I remember words exactly, because words are the one thing I have never lost. It was past 11 in Oregon, which meant it was past 2 in the place he was calling from, and a mother knows that a call at that hour is never good news dressed up as opportunity. But he dressed it up anyway. "This is the one, Mom," he said, and his voice ran fast and bright the way it did when he was small and wanted something badly enough to believe his own wanting. "Just help me start. It's only on paper, just until I refinance." I said yes before he had finished the sentence, because saying yes to Tobin was a reflex older than my good sense. I did not hear the lie that night. I want to be honest about that. My ear failed me, or I let it, because you do not want to hear your own child climbing higher into his chest on the word paper. He never bought it from me. He married Marin instead. He let her father, a man named Wendell Everly, who made his money in something I never fully understood, fold him into a family that measured people by their reflections. And Tobin, who once swung his heels against my cabinets and ate 6 scones at a time, began to tell people he had bought this house himself. Self. That word sat wrong in my mouth. There was nothing self about it. It was Dwayne's insurance and my pension, and 30 years of the two of us going without a vacation, so a boy could have music lessons and shoes that fit. I did not cry. I took a photograph of the deed with my phone. Then I opened my email and I sent that photograph to the one person in Oregon who had always told me the truth. Ruth Halloran, my attorney, the woman who had drawn up Dwayne's will and held my hand at the reading of it. I did not write a message. I did not need to. I only wanted the deed somewhere safe in a place that was mine before I spent a week pretending I was a guest. Then I put the envelope away, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark, listening to a house breathe under my own name. I had come here to make peace. I understood lying there that I had walked into something else entirely. I did not yet know what I would do about it. I only knew what I would do first. The thing I have always done best. I would listen. The next morning, the house was already loud with a certain kind of quiet efficiency by the time I found my way to the front of it. Marin stood at the counter feeding fruit into a tall machine that shrieked like a table saw. Tobin leaned against the refrigerator, thumb moving across his phone. Neither looked up when I came in. "Morning," I said. "Morning," Tobin answered, eyes still down. I poured myself coffee from a machine that had more buttons than my car. It came out thin and bitter. I did not complain. I sat at the counter and I watched, which is a thing I am very good at because watching is only listening with your eyes. "We're out most of the day," Marin announced to the window. "Soccer for Colton. Sensory class for the baby." "That sounds lovely," I said. "Maybe I'll take a walk, stretch my legs." Tobin finally looked at me. "You sure you're okay on your own? It's a particular kind of neighborhood. Just, don't get into long conversations with people." "Why would I said. "No reason," he said too quickly, and I watched Marin's eyes cut sideways to him, sharp as a paring knife, the look of a woman who has just heard her partner say a word too many. I filed that look away. I have a place in my mind for looks like that. They left in a storm of bags and straps and the baby's soft complaints. The garage door groaned down behind their car and the house went still. And in the stillness, I did the thing I had promised myself I would not do, and then did anyway, because a woman has a right to know the ground she is standing on. I walked the house. I had never been inside it before. When Tobin bought it, when I bought it and he moved into it, I was recovering from a fall and could not travel. After that, there was always a reason. Too busy. Bad timing. Marin was under the weather. The house was not ready. I understood now what ready had meant. It had meant scrubbed of me. The living room was beautiful and cold. On the mantel stood 4 framed photographs. Marin's parents on a boat. Marin's sister somewhere with palm trees. Marin's 2 older children in matching sweaters. Not one photograph of Tobin as a boy. Not one photograph with me in it. Not even the baby had a picture on that mantel, only a professional print of her in a studio posed and lit and turned into a product. In the hallway hung black and white photographs of bridges and skylines. Architecture. Nothing that had ever been alive. I walked slowly, my knees protesting each step, and I let my hand trail along the wall, and I listened to a house that had been decorated to say we did this ourselves. We owe no one, look how far we have come. Upstairs I found the office again, the door standing open a crack, and I let myself in because a woman is allowed to stand in a room she paid for. There was a clean desk and 2 monitors and a framed diploma on the wall from the college Tobin had started and never finished, though the frame did not mention that part. There were awards for insurance sales lined up on a shelf. Not one personal photograph anywhere. And then tucked into the corner of the bookshelf, low, where you would only find it if you were looking, I saw a small wooden box. I knew that box. I had given it to him the year his father died to hold whatever a boy holds when the floor drops out of his life. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of Tobin at 7 with a gap in his teeth, and beneath the photograph, folded small a note in my own handwriting. Never forget who you are. Never forget who stood with you when no one else would. I had written it and slipped it into the box without telling him. He had kept it all these years, carried it from apartment to apartment, to this cold and gleaming house, and hidden it in a corner where no one from Marin's world would ever see it. I closed the box very gently and set it back exactly as I found it. A man does not keep a note like that if he has truly forgotten. He only tells himself he has. Then I found the laundry room, and in it a tall cabinet, and inside the cabinet a stack of folders. Home warranties, appliance manuals, and a beige folder. I recognized the same beige folder I had signed papers out of 3 years before. I pulled it onto the counter and opened it. The first thing inside was not the deed. The first thing inside was a document I had never seen, and my eye caught on the words before my mind did. Quitclaim, grantor Joelle Marie Johnson, grantees Tobin Johnson and Marin Johnson. It was filled out. It was clean. There was a small yellow tab stuck to the signature line, the kind you use to show a person exactly where to put their name. It was waiting for me. It had been waiting for me before my plane had even left Oregon. I set my coffee down very carefully so it would not spill. This was why I had been invited. Not for a visit, not for the baby, not because anyone wanted to hear how the flight was. I had been flown across a country to sign my house away, and the whole warm performance of family had been staged around the moment when someone would slide a pen across a table and say it was just paperwork. I stood very still and let the understanding move through me all the way to the bottom. It is a strange thing to hold proof of your own smallness in a family. Part of me wanted to believe I had it wrong, that there was some innocent reason a deed, transferring my house to my son and his wife, sat filled out and tabbed and ready in a laundry room cabinet. That is the part of a mother that will believe anything right up to the last possible second, because the alternative is a grief too large to carry standing up. But my ear does not lie to me even when my heart begs it to. I had heard the whisper at the door. I had heard the closet chosen for me. I had heard a welcome card call this house by a name that was not mine. The folder only confirmed what my ear had already known before my plane touched the ground. I did not sign it. I did not take it. I put it back exactly where I found it, squared the folder, closed the cabinet. Some things you do not do in anger. You do them in daylight, slowly, with the right person watching. I had already sent the deed to Ruth. Now I knew what she and I would be discussing. I made myself a real breakfast at the stove. An egg and toast, the first food in that house that resembled food. And as I stood there eating over the sink like a teenager, I heard the front door and the murmur of Tobin's voice low, the voice a man uses when he does not want to be heard. He had come back for something. A forgotten bag, a wallet. It did not matter. What mattered was that he stood in the front hall with his phone against his ear, and he did not know I was awake and listening from the back of the house, and I stood very still because a voice teacher learns to disappear so the student forgets to perform. "Wendell," he said. "No, it's handled. She's here. We'll get it done this weekend before you fly out. The house is clean, it's all in my name, you don't have to worry about the collateral." A pause. The refrigerator hummed. My heart went very slow and very clear. "I told you," Tobin said, and here his voice climbed, tightened, went thin on the last words, the way it always had when he was 9 and swearing he had not broken the thing he had broken. "I told you it's mine. It's always been mine." There it was, the lie in the throat, exactly where I had taught 1,000 students to find their truth. He had told Wendell Everly, the man whose money was propping up whatever new venture Tobin had built, that he owned this house free and clear. He had offered it in some way as proof that he was solid, that he was a man worth investing in. And the only thing standing between that lie and the daylight was my signature on a quitclaim deed in a beige folder in the laundry room. The front door closed. The car pulled away. I stood at the sink with a cold half of toast in my hand, and I understood the whole shape of the weekend now. They needed my name gone. They needed it gone this weekend before Marin's father saw anything he should not see. And they had counted on the one thing everyone had always counted on, that Joelle would smile and sign and disappear. I finished my toast. I washed the plate and dried it and put it away. And then I sat at the oak table in the empty house that belonged to me, and I did not feel angry exactly. I felt awake. I felt the way I used to feel when a student who had been lying to herself for years finally opened her mouth and let the true note out, and the whole room changed temperature. I called Ruth Halloran that afternoon while the house was still empty. "Joelle," she said, "I got your email. I've been staring at this deed all morning, wondering when you were going to call." I told her everything. The whisper at the door, the narrow closet, the quitclaim in the laundry room. The phone call I had overheard word for word because I remember words the way other people remember faces. She was quiet for a moment. "Ruth is not a woman who wastes breath. Let me be clear about where you stand," she said finally. "You own that house outright. No mortgage, no CO owner, no lion. That means you can do anything a sole owner can do. You can live in it, rent it, sell it, or transfer it. And you do not need one word of permission from Tobin or from anyone else, because his name is not on it and never has been. And the quitclaim, I asked, is worth exactly nothing until you sign it, she said. Do not sign it. Do not let anyone put a pen in your hand at a dinner table. If they push you, tell them your attorney reviews everything and then you call me. Understand. I understand, I said. There was another pause. Joelle, she said more gently now, what do you want, not what are you owed? What do you actually want out of this? I looked through the wide window at the manicured yard, the untouched sandbox still wrapped in its shipping plastic, the hedges trimmed to the millimeter. I want it to go to Sadie, I said, and I surprised myself because I had not known it until I said it. I want the house to go to my granddaughter, and I want it done in a way that no one can undo. Tobin can keep living in it. I am not throwing anyone into the street. But he will never own it, and he will never sell it, and he will never hand it to Wendell Everly as a poker chip. It goes to the one child in that house who still lights up when I open my mouth. Ruth exhaled slowly. That she said we can do. An irrevocable trust with Sadie as beneficiary. You transfer the house into it. Once it's done, it's done. Not even you can pull it back out, which is the whole point. It protects her from all of them, including from any change of heart on your end. Draw it up, I said. Give me the week, she said. I'll have documents ready by the weekend. Can you get to a notary? I looked around the house. I thought about the family that would soon leave me alone in it, trusting me to water the plants and stay out of the way. I said I think I can arrange some privacy. We hung up. I sat in the quiet a long time. Then I took out my little recorder, the one from my purse, and I turned it over in my hands, and I thought about how a woman defends herself when the whole world has decided she is harmless. Not with a weapon, with a witness. In Tennessee, I would learn that afternoon from Ruth. A person may record any conversation she is part of. She does not need anyone's permission, but her own. I was going to be part of every conversation that mattered from here on out. And I was going to remember all of them in their own voices, whether they liked it or not. That evening, Sadie found me on the back patio. The others were inside arguing softly about something, and the little girl wandered out in her socks and stood looking at me the way children look at an animal they have not decided is safe. She had Dwayne's eyes. I had not noticed it in the studio photograph on the mantel, because the mantel had ironed all the life out of her. But here in the going gold of the evening, she had her grandfather's eyes exactly, and my chest did something painful and sweet. Are you really Daddy's mommy? She asked. I am, I said. She considered this. Grandma Sandra says we only have one grandma. Well, I said, now you have two, is that all right? She thought about it with her whole face the way 5-year-olds do. Then she said, can you sing Grandma Sandra Can't Sing? She just plays it on her phone. And something in me, some door that had been shut and painted over, came open. I can sing, I told her. I taught people how to sing for a very long time. Sing something, she said, and sat down on the cold patio stone beside my chair, as if this were the most natural thing in the world, as if I were not a family friend, as if I were exactly what I was. So I sang her the lullaby. Not a famous one. One I wrote myself 40 years ago for the students who were afraid, a small round tune about a boat that finds the harbor, even in the dark. I had sung it to Tobin every night of his childhood. He used to fall asleep before the boat reached the shore. I sang it low so it would not carry into the house, and Sadie leaned her small weight against the arm of my chair and went perfectly still, listening the way only a child who is starved for something will listen. That was when the door slid open. There you are, Marin said, and her voice had a bright, hard edge. Sadie, bath time. Come on. She scooped the girl up and did not look at me, and the last I saw of Sadie that night was her face over her stepmother's shoulder, watching me mouthing the rest of the tune to herself as she was carried away. I sat alone on the patio as the light died. I understood a great deal in that moment. I understood that of everyone in that house, the only one who wanted the sound of me was the one they would never think to protect. And I understood with a calm that frightened me a little exactly whose name belonged on the deed when this was over. The rest of the week moved the way weeks move when everyone in the house is waiting for the same thing and pretending they are not. I was polite. I was quiet. I baked because they could not stop me from baking, and I fed the older children scones they were not supposed to have, and watched them eat 6 at a time, exactly the way their stepfather once had. I played the harmless mother. I let them believe the performance was working. And I listened. I heard Marin on the phone with her mother calling me. She never, Joelle, never his mother. She's still here. No, she hasn't signed yet. Tobin says she will. I heard Sandra Everly's voice answer through the little speaker, tinny and certain, saying something about how some people simply do not know when they have overstayed a welcome. I heard Tobin reassure Wendell twice more, his throat climbing each time the lie getting a half step higher, every time he told it, the way a false note gets sharper the longer a singer holds it, and hopes no one notices. I heard the two of them at night through the wall, low and urgent, the words house and weekend, and just get it done rising up like the tips of icebergs. And in between I heard the ordinary sounds of a family that did not know it was being weighed. The baby's soft complaints in the small hours. Colton thundering down the stairs. Piper practicing the same 4 measures on a keyboard over and over, getting them wrong, the same way each time. And my hands ached to go up there and show her how to breathe through the phrase. But I did not, because I was Aunt Joelle, and Aunt Joelle does not teach anyone anything. I baked instead. I fed the older children the scones they were not supposed to have, and watched them eat 6 at a time. And I did not tell them that their stepfather had once done exactly the same thing on a stool by an old piano, swinging his heels, singing The Boat Home. On Saturday, they threw the brunch. Wendell and Sandra Everly arrived in a car that cost more than my first house. Wendell was a big man with a soft handshake and eyes that priced everything they landed on. Sandra wore linen and a strand of real pearls and looked at my cardigan the way you look at a stain. The neighbors came too. Roy and Nadine Halstead from across the street, he something in finance, she on some board or other, both of them armed with the same glossy, weightless friendliness. The food was catered. Not one dish was made by a human hand that loved anyone at that table. There were little towers of things on slate boards, and a man in a black shirt refilling glasses. And in the middle of it, Marin put her hand on my shoulder in front of everyone and said brightly, "And this is Joelle. She's an old family friend. She knew Tobin back when he was little." A family friend, one neighbor said warmly. "You're practically an aunt then." Aunt Joelle Marin agreed, laughing her light laugh. "Exactly." I felt the word go into me the way a splinter goes in, small and deep and impossible to see. But I did not flinch. I have stood in front of frightened students and hostile parents and full auditoriums. I know how to keep my face while my chest burns. I smiled and I handed Nadine Halstead a glass of wine, and I let the lie settle over the room like dust. They talked about the house, of course they did. Roy Halstead said the neighborhood had appreciated tremendously that Tobin and Marin had bought at exactly the right moment, that it was a shrewd move. Values on this street had nearly doubled in 3 years, he said, and you could hear the respect in it, the way money respects money. And Tobin, my son, stood there in his dust-colored shirt and accepted it. He did not say his mother had wired the money. He did not say there was no mortgage because a widow had emptied her husband's life insurance into these walls. He let them believe he had built it. He looked for 1 second like a boy waiting to see if the teacher would catch him in the lie. And I looked back at him, and I let him see that I had. "So you're out visiting from where?" Nadine Halstead asked me, leaning in with the polite hunger of a woman who collects other people's stories. "Oregon," I said. "It's a long way." "It is," I agreed. "It's always worth the trip to see a place you have a stake in." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, are you in property?" she asked. "You could say I have an interest in this one," I said, and I let it sit there mild as milk while Tobin's wine went down the wrong way, and he coughed into his napkin, and Marin's hand stilled on the stem of her glass. Wendell Everly's eyes came up and moved from me to my son and back again slow, the way a man checks a figure that does not quite add up. Nadine laughed, uncertain whether I had made a joke. I smiled and refilled her glass and let the moment pass because I was not ready yet. And a singer learns above all else the discipline of the held breath, the note you do not release until the room is exactly right to receive it. Then Marin set the trap. She did it beautifully. I have to give her that. She waited until the wine had loosened everyone, until Wendell was leaning back full of catered salmon, and then she went to the office and came back with the beige folder, and she set it on the oak table near my elbow, casual as a napkin. "Oh, while I'm thinking of it," she said. "Joelle, there's just a little family paperwork we've been meaning to get to. Nothing exciting, just some estate housekeeping. Whenever you have a pen." The whole table was listening now in the way people listen while pretending not to. Wendell's eyes came up off his plate. This was the moment. If I signed in front of witnesses in the warm haze of a party, it would be done, and Tobin's lie would become true retroactively. And Wendell would fund whatever he was funding, and Aunt Joelle would fly home to Oregon and vanish. I picked up the folder. I opened it slowly, and I looked at the quitclaim, and then I looked up at the ring of watching faces, and I put on the exact voice of a careful old woman who does not want to be any trouble. "Oh, I don't sign anything without reading it twice and letting my lawyer look it over," I said, light and apologetic. Dwayne taught me that God rest him. He said the day you sign something at a party is the day you regret it at the courthouse. She smiled at Wendell, who barked out a laugh because it was the sort of thing a man like Wendell says himself. "Smart woman," Wendell said. I closed the folder gently and set it back down and left it there unsigned in the middle of the table, and I felt the temperature of the room change, and I saw Marin's smile stay in place while everything behind it went cold. Tobin looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said a word, and both of us understood that the easy way had just closed, and that whatever came next would not be easy at all. The brunch ended the way parties end, with cheeks kissed and leftovers refused and cars pulling out of the drive. Roy Halstead clapped Tobin on the shoulder and said, "What a lovely woman your aunt is, so gracious." And Tobin said, "Thanks, she is." And I stood in the doorway of my own house being called someone else's aunt for the last time, though I did not know it was the last time yet. When the door finally shut, the performance came off Marin's face like a mask. "That was mortifying," she said, not quite to me, not quite to Tobin, to the room. "My father flew in for this." "I'm going to lie down," I said pleasantly, and I went to the guest room and I closed the door and I took out my recorder and set it on the nightstand where I could reach it because I could feel the weather changing in that house. When the sky goes that particular color, you bring the washing in. I had learned that from Dwayne too. They came for me within the hour. There was a soft knock, and then Tobin let himself in without waiting for an answer, the way he had let himself into everything his whole life. He sat on the end of the guest bed. Marin stood in the doorway with her arms folded, guarding the exit. "Mom," Tobin said, and his voice had gone soft and reasonable, the tone he used when he wanted something and had decided to be patient about getting it. "I think there was a misunderstanding out there. That paperwork, it's nothing sinister. It's just tidying up. You put your name on the house to help us out, and we're so grateful we are. But it complicates things now. Taxes, insurance. Marin's dad is helping us with the business, and his accountant needs everything to be clean." "Clean," I said. "Simple," Marin said from the doorway. "Everything in Tobin's name where it should be. You get to stop worrying about a house 3,000 miles away. It's a gift to you, really." I reached over without hurry, and I pressed the button on my recorder, and I watched neither of them notice, because neither of them has ever once imagined that I might be a person who does things. "Tell me something," I said. "When you say where it should be, where do you think it should be?" "With us," Tobin said. "We live here. We raise our family here. It's our home." "You live here," I agreed. "That is true, and I am glad you do. But I want to hear you say the other part out loud, Tobin. The part where you tell people you bought it." The room went still. Marin's arms tightened. Tobin's jaw worked. "I don't tell people anything," he said, and his throat climbed on the word anything, and I heard it as clearly as a wrong note in a quiet room. "You told Wendell Everly," I said. "You told him it's yours free and clear, that there's no one else on the paper. You told him this week. I heard you, Tobin, standing right there in the front hall. 'It's mine,' you said. 'It's always been mine.'" His face did a terrible thing then. It tried to be angry, and it could not manage it, and underneath the failed anger was a boy who had been caught, and under the boy was something worse, which was shame. "Okay," he said. His voice dropped. "Okay, fine. Yeah, I told him it's mine, because it needs to be mine. Do you have any idea what it looks like at my age in this neighborhood? If people find out my mother bought my house, do you know what Wendell would think of me? What Marin's whole family would think? People judge Mom. That's the world. I can't have anyone thinking I didn't earn this." And there it was, the whole ugly truth finally, with no ribbon on it. I looked at my son, and for a moment I did not see the man in the dust-colored shirt at all. I saw a boy of 6 standing on a stool beside me, at the old upright piano, matching his small voice to mine, so proud when he found the note that he would clap his own hands. I taught him to sing before I taught him to read. He used to run to the door when I came home from a long day and throw his arms around my legs and announce to anyone in earshot, "That's my mom. She teaches people to sing." He was proud of me then, out loud in front of strangers, without a shred of calculation in it. Somewhere between that stool and this house, someone had taught him that the woman who gave him his voice was a thing to keep in a narrow closet. And the worst of it, the part that sat in my chest like a stone, was that I did not know when it had happened because I had not been listening closely enough to catch the first false note. I had carried him. I had worked doubles at the studio and taken in extra students on Saturdays so he could have lessons and shoes in a college he never finished. I had sung him a boat safely into harbor every night for years, and he stood in a house I had bought with his dead father's insurance money, And he told me the problem was that people might find out I had helped him. I never wanted credit, Tobin, I said. And my voice did not shake because I have spent 40 years teaching a voice not to shake. I wanted my name spoken in my own son's house. That is all. Not on a plaque. Just spoken. It's complicated, he said. No, I said. It is very simple. You want me to disappear so that a lie can stand up straight. And I have spent my whole life disappearing for you. But I am done teaching you that lesson. That was when Marin stepped fully into the room because Marin had run out of patience. And Marin has never in her life imagined that I was anything but a soft old obstacle to be moved. Let me make this easy, she said, and her voice was flat and clear and utterly certain. You sign the deed over. You fly back to Oregon. You send Sadie a card at Christmas if you want to feel like a grandmother. And we all move on with our lives. That is the arrangement, Joelle. That has always been the arrangement. You just weren't supposed to make it awkward. She said it to my face. Every word of it. To my face in the guest room with the little recorder running quietly on the nightstand between us, catching all of it in her own hard voice, because it had never once crossed her mind that I would think to protect myself or that I could. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I did the only thing that would end the conversation and buy me what I needed, which was time and an empty house. I let my shoulders drop. I let my eyes go tired. I made myself for them into the woman they had already decided I was. You're right, I said quietly. I'm sorry. This is your home. I've made it strange. Let me think about it. Let me just get through the week and I'll do what's right for the family. The change in the room was immediate. Tobin's shoulders came down. Marin's face softened into something that was not kindness, but was close enough to fool anyone who wanted to be fooled. And Marin wanted very much to be fooled because being fooled meant she had won. Thank you, Tobin breathed. Thank you, Mom. That's all we're asking. Marin even smiled at me on her way out. We're taking the kids to the lake this weekend, she said. The Everleys have a place. You should stay here, get some rest. Have the house to yourself. It'll be good for you. I would love that, I said. And I meant it, though not the way she thought I did. They left me alone in the guest room, and I turned off the recorder and I sat in the dark for a long time. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something older and quieter than triumph. I had two things now that they did not know I had. I had their whole plan in their own voices recorded lawfully, in a state that let a woman keep a record of what was said to her face. And I had a promise from Ruth Halloran that the papers would be ready by the weekend, the very weekend they were about to hand me the keys and drive away. I want to be honest about the recording because it matters. I never planned to use it as a weapon. I could have. A different woman would have. I could have played it for Wendell Everly and watched Tobin's investment collapse. I could have played it for the Halsteads and watched the whole street learn who Aunt Joelle really was. I thought about it. I am not a saint, and I will not pretend the thought did not have its pleasures. But I have spent my life listening to people's voices, and I know what a voice carries. A voice carries a person's whole history, every fear they were ever handed. And I could not build my granddaughter's inheritance on the sound of her father being destroyed. So I made a different decision. I sent the recording to Ruth and only to Ruth to be kept sealed as protection. If they ever came after me, if they ever tried to claim I had been tricked or was not in my right mind, the truth was on file in my own lawyer's office. Not a bomb, a shield. There is a great difference, and I wanted my hands clean of the first kind of thing. I slept that night finally deeply the way you sleep when a decision has been made, and there is nothing left to do but wait for the morning to do it. They packed on Friday in a flurry of sunscreen and coolers and the baby's endless bags. Marin checked the car seat twice and the refrigerator 3 times. Tobin carried suitcases to the trunk. And Sadie, my Sadie, wrapped her arms around my leg in the front hall and would not let go. Sing the boat one, she whispered. I crouched down my knees screaming and I put my mouth to her ear and I sang the first line of the lullaby just for her, just the two of us in the hall while the others loaded the car. Her whole body relaxed against me. Then Marin called her name and she ran, and at the door she turned and looked at me the way you look at someone you already miss. And I lifted my hand and she was gone. Text me if anything comes up, Tobin said, jingling the spare keys before he handed them over. Don't let the alarm beep too long, it gets fussy. I'll manage, I said. Thanks for staying, Marin said, and she almost meant it because my staying meant I was tamed, and a tamed thing is a relief. Enjoy the quiet. Oh, I will, I said. They pulled out of the drive, the taillights swinging away into the gray morning, and I stood on the porch in my cardigan and did not wave. Then I went back inside and I closed the door and I locked it, and I leaned my back against the smooth painted wood and let out a breath. I felt like I had been holding for 3 years. I made real coffee at the stove, slow and dark, in a chipped ceramic mug I found pushed to the back of a cabinet, some orphan cup no one had let themselves love. I took it out to the patio and I sat in the gold morning and I let my shoulders come all the way down. Then I went inside and I called Ruth Halloran. "It's ready," she said before I even spoke. "The trust is drafted. Irrevocable Sadie as sole beneficiary held until she's 25, or released earlier by petition if there's a real need, education, medical, that kind of thing. The family can continue to occupy the home, but the moment you transfer the property into the trust, Tobin can never own. It's sell it, borrow against it, or offer it to anyone as collateral. It leaves your hands and it lands in hers, and no one on earth can move it after that. Not him, not Marin, not even you." "That's what I want," I said. "I've got a notary who can come to you," she said. "Mobile notary does house calls all over the Nashville area. Her name is Dana Whitfield. She can be there tomorrow morning. You sign in front of her, she notarizes, we record the deed with the county, and it's finished. Are you sure, Joelle? Once this is done, there is no undoing it. That's the whole design." I looked out at the yard, at the sandbox, still wrapped in plastic, that no child in this house was allowed to be a child in. I have never been more sure of anything I said. That night I cooked myself a proper dinner in a house that had never smelled of a real meal. I roasted a chicken with lemon and thyme. I made biscuits from memory, my hands remembering the motion my mind had half forgotten. I set the oak table for one, and I used the good dishes, the ones Marin kept for company, because for once I was company worth the good dishes. I poured a glass of the cheap wine from the back of the rack, not the bottle Marin was saving, and I ate slowly, listening to nothing but my own fork and my own breath. After dinner I went out to the garage and I found what I was looking for, because I knew it would be there. A cardboard box, dusty, shoved behind the Christmas bins with one word written on the side in Marin's neat hand. Storage. Inside were the things they had not thrown away, because throwing them away would have looked cruel, but could not bear to display either. Photographs of Tobin and me. Tobin at his high school graduation with my arm around him. Tobin at 9 at the coast the year after Dwayne died, a half-eaten sandwich in his hand and the wind in his hair, and both of us laughing at something the camera did not catch. A recipe card in my handwriting. A birthday card I had sent unopened. I sat on the garage floor with the box in my lap for a long time and let myself remember. The coast photograph was from the summer after Dwayne died, when Tobin was 9, and neither of us knew how to be a family of 2 yet. We had driven to the shore with no plan and no money, and we had eaten grocery store sandwiches on a gray beach in a cold wind, and at some point he had said something so silly that we both bent over laughing, and a stranger had offered to take our picture. That was the best day, Tobin used to say for years afterward. That was the best day, Mom. I turned the photograph over in the dim garage light, and I thought you kept this. You could not throw it away, and you could not put it on your beautiful mantle, so you buried it in a box behind the Christmas bins, and you have been living above it this whole time, walking over your own history in your polished shoes. I took the coast photograph out of the box. I found a frame in a hall closet, an empty one waiting for a picture worthy of it, and I put us in it, the widow and her boy laughing on a gray beach. And I set it on the console table in the front hall, in the very center where anyone who walked through that door would have to see it. Then I carried the box inside and left it on the oak table, opened the past laid out like evidence in a quiet courtroom. The recipe card for the apple cake he begged for every birthday. The unopened card. A boy's whole first life packed in cardboard and hidden, waiting for someone to remember it was there. In the morning, Dana Whitfield came. She was a calm woman with kind eyes behind wire glasses, and she carried a slim leather folder and a stamp and an air of having seen every kind of family there is. We sat at the oak table, the same table where 2 nights before Marin had slid a folder toward me and called it housekeeping. Dana laid out the pages in order and explained each one in a low, even voice, the way a good teacher explains a hard passage, slowly, without hurry, making sure I understood before we moved on. She asked me twice in different words whether I was signing of my own free will, whether anyone had pressured me, whether I understood that this could not be undone. I told her yes, each time clearly, my voice steady, because I wanted the record to show a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. She checked my identification against my face. She watched me sign each page, and then she pressed her seal into the paper with a small, firm sound that I will remember for the rest of my life. The sound of a thing becoming true. I had spent a lifetime waiting for students to make a sound that could not be taken back. That morning at last I made mine. When it was done, she gathered the pages and slid them into her folder. "You're not the first," she said not unkindly as she stood to go. "Mothers mostly. Grandmothers. People who gave everything and got asked to disappear. We do more of these than you'd think." I walked her to the door. I did not need to say anything, and she did not expect me to. She stepped into the sunlight and was gone, and the house behind me was at last entirely and unchangeably held for a 5-year-old girl with her grandfather's eyes. I spent that afternoon doing something I had not planned and did not fully understand until later. I sat down with my little recorder, the one that had caught Marin's flat, certain voice 2 nights before, and I made a new recording over a blank track. I did not record a confession or an accusation. I recorded myself singing the lullaby. The whole thing, all the way through the little boat, finding the harbor in the dark, sung the way I used to sing it to Tobin, the way I had sung it to Sadie on the patio in the failing light. I sang it clean and low, no shake in it, 40 years of training holding the notes steady even as my eyes filled. And at the end I said a few plain words. I said, "Sadie, this is your grandmother. This house is yours now. When you are big, you will understand what that means. Until then, whenever you are afraid of the dark, remember the boat always finds the harbor. And remember that I heard you. Of everyone in this house, I heard you." I recorded it in one take, which I had never once managed in 40 years of demanding second takes from frightened teenagers. I suppose I finally understood the thing I had spent my whole life trying to teach them, that the true note is the one you stop protecting. I did not protect anything. I let my voice do the one thing I had come 3,000 miles to do, which was to be heard in this house by the one person who wanted to hear it. When it was finished, I played it back once, and I listened to myself the way I would have listened to a student, and for the first time in a very long while, I did not find a single thing I would change. Then I set the recorder on the console table next to the framed photograph of a boy and his mother on a gray beach. I want to be clear about what I left and what I did not. I left the trust documents on the office desk tidy squared tucked under the framed diploma. Tobin was so proud of the one from a school my scones had helped pay for. His name was nowhere in them. The house belonged to Sadie now. That was the truth they would find. And I left the recorder with the lullaby on it, my voice, my craft, the one thing they could never take or borrow or put their own name on. But I did not leave the other recording. The one with Marin's voice on it, the one with the whole ugly plan. That stayed sealed in Ruth Halloran's office, a shield and not a sword 3,000 miles away, exactly where it belonged. I would not hand my granddaughter a house built on the sound of her father breaking. Some things you keep so that you never have to use them. I left before dawn. I called a car and I packed only what I had come with. And I took one last walk through the house that had never once let me be its guest without punishing me for it. In the front hall, I stopped at the console table. The photograph. The recorder. My whole answer sitting in the dark, waiting for morning. At the door, I looked back through the glass at the plaque on the lawn. The Everly house still there, still lit by the porch light. I did not touch it. Let them keep their little sign. It had never been true, and now it would never matter. I stepped into the car and I flew home to Oregon to my small house and my husband's garden, and I did not look down at Tennessee as it slid away beneath the clouds. They came back on a Sunday afternoon. I was not there to see it, but I have imagined it so many times it feels like memory. The garage door groaning up. The baby fussing. Marin calling for someone to grab the cooler. Tobin dragging suitcases across the entry tiles, calling out, "Mom, we're back into a house that did not answer." The guest room empty. The bed made. The closet hung with nothing but wire hangers. And then the photograph on the console table. Him and me laughing on the coast, the wind in our hair. He would have stopped in front of it. I know my son. He would have stopped and something would have moved in his chest that he had spent years teaching himself not to feel. Then the recorder beside it. He would have picked it up. He would have pressed the button expecting God knows what, an accusation, a curse, a demand. And instead the house would have filled with his mother's voice singing the boat safely into the harbor, the tune he fell asleep to 1,000 times before he learned to be ashamed of where he came from. He would have stood there in the front hall and listened to the whole thing all the way to the end, to the part where I told a 5-year-old that I had heard her when no one else did. And then he would have gone to the office and found the papers under his precious diploma, and read them once and then read them again the way a person reads words that refuse to rearrange themselves into the meaning he wants. Marin would have come in behind him. She would have taken the pages out of his hands and scanned them and said, "This can't be legal in the flat." Certain voice that had never once in her life been wrong about anything until now. And he would have had to tell her. She never signed it over. She never had to. It was always hers. I only let us believe it was ours. The house was not his. It had never been his. And now it never would be because it belonged to his daughter, locked away where his shame and Wendell Everly's money and Marin's flat, certain voice could never reach it. He could go on living in it. He could raise his children under its roof and mow its lawn and host his catered parties in it for the rest of his life. But he could never again stand in it and tell a soul he had done it himself because the deed in the county record would call him a liar, in language no dinner guest could argue with. Marin called Ruth Halloran on Monday morning. I know because Ruth told me. Marin's voice was not flat and certain anymore. She wanted to know if the trust could be challenged. She used the word tricked. She used the word competent, as in was the old woman even competent to sign. And Ruth, who has been waiting her whole career for a phone call like that, told her very pleasantly that Joelle Johnson was entirely competent, that the transfer was clean and final, and that if Marin wished to pursue the matter in court, Ruth would be happy to enter into evidence a recording lawfully made in the state of Tennessee of Marin, explaining the arrangement in her own words. There was a silence on the line. Ruth said that was worth every year she had spent in the law. Marin did not call back. Tobin called me that same night. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Hi, Mom," he said, and his voice was low and careful, and there was no lie in it anywhere, not in the breath, not in the pitch, not in the vowels. For the first time in years, my son's voice was telling the truth, and the truth was that he was wrecked. "You could have talked to me," he said. "I tried," I said. "For 3 years, Tobin, I tried." "I didn't think you'd actually do it," he said. "I didn't think I'd have to," I said. "Until you asked me to disappear. I was quiet a long time. I heard the house behind him, the baby, monitor the ordinary sounds of a life." Then he said in a smaller voice than I had heard from him since he was a boy. I heard the recording. "The one you left. The boat one." "I know," I said. "I forgot," he said. And his voice finally broke all that training in me, useless against it, because a mother has no defense against the sound of her child breaking, honestly. "I forgot who bought it. I forgot who you were. I let them make you into somebody else, and I let myself go along with it, because it was easier, and I am so ashamed, Mom, I am so ashamed." I let him cry. I did not rush to comfort him, because some tears a person needs to cry all the way to the bottom, and comforting them too soon only leaves the crying half done. I have learned that from a lifetime of watching people finally let a true sound out. "What happens to the house now?" he asked when he could speak again. "It's Sadie's," I said. "It's in a trust. You'll all keep living in it. Nothing changes about your day. But you won't ever own it, and you won't ever be able to sell it or borrow against it, and you will never again be able to tell anyone you bought it, because you didn't, and now you never will." "That's fair," he said after a moment. His voice was steady now, worn smooth. "It's more than fair." "Yes," I said, "it is." We did not say much after that. There was not much left to say that our voices had not already said for us. But before he hung up, he told me one thing that I have kept. "Sadie asks about you every night," he said. "She wants the boat song. Marin tried to sing it to her, and Sadie got angry and said she was doing it wrong. She said Grandma Joelle does it right." I laughed, and it turned into something else halfway through, and I let it. A few weeks later, a package came to my little house in Oregon. No note. Just a small framed photograph, the one from the coast, the widow and her boy laughing in the wind. He had sent it back to me, or maybe he had sent me a copy I never asked. I set it on the shelf by my front window next to the photograph of Dwayne in his good shirt and the clay handprint Sadie had made in preschool, the one Tobin mailed without being asked. 3 generations on one shelf in the light where anyone who came through my door would have to see them. Sadie calls me now. Tobin sets it up, and her small face fills the screen, and she demands the boat song before she will tell me a single thing about her day. "Grandma," she said one evening, "Daddy says you gave me a house." "Not yet," I said, "but one day if you want it." "Will it still have the big bathtub?" she asked, deadly serious. "If your parents don't change it," I said. "Yes." "Then I paint my room pink." "You can paint it any color in the whole world," I said. She thought about this with her whole face, Dwayne's eyes narrowing in concentration. Then she asked me to teach her the boat song properly, all the verses, not just the part everyone knew. And so I did over the phone, a line at a time, her small, serious voice matching mine the way her father's once had on a stool by an old piano. She got the second verse wrong 4 times, and then on the 5th she got it exactly right, and I heard the small, triumphant intake of her breath, and I had to hold the phone away for a moment so she would not hear what her getting it right had done to me. "Will you live there too?" she asked when the song was done. "No, sweetheart," I said gently, but I'll always be close by. I promise. You're not mad at Daddy anymore, she said. It was not quite a question. No, I said, and I found that it was true. Not anymore. Because it was never really about anger. It was about a name. It was about a woman being spoken aloud in her own son's house. It was about the fact that I spent 40 years teaching frightened people not to swallow their own voices, and then let my own son convince me to swallow mine. And it took him asking me to disappear entirely for me to finally remember that I had never lost it. Not one note of it. The days are quieter now, not emptier. Quieter the way a room is quiet after a good song ends when the sound is gone, but the shape of it still hangs in the air. I tend Dwayne's garden. I bake more than one person should. I get letters from Sadie in crooked crayon, and once she sent me a drawing of a house pink with 2 stick figures out front. One was labeled me. One was labeled Grandma Joelle, and underneath in careful backward letters, she had written my house and Grandma house too. I keep it on the refrigerator. The plaque came down eventually. Tobin told me on the phone, almost shy about it. The Everly House sign gone from the lawn one morning, no announcement. Sadie had asked what it was for, he said, and he had not been able to think of a single honest answer, so he pulled it out of the ground himself. We don't need it, he told her. I liked that. I think often about the recording that stayed sealed in Ruth Halloran's office, the one with Marin's flat, certain voice laying out the whole arrangement. I never played it for anyone. I never will unless I am forced to, and I do not expect to be forced. It is not mercy exactly. It is closer to craft. I spent 40 years learning that the loudest way to win an argument is almost never the way that changes anything. You do not fix a frightened voice by shouting at it. You wait and you listen, and you hold your own note true until the other person hears the difference for themselves. I did not need Marin destroyed. I needed Sadie safe and Tobin honest, and both of those things I got, and I got them quietly, which is the only way I have ever gotten anything worth keeping. And if you ever wonder how a woman flies across a whole country to be treated like a stranger in a house she paid for, and flies home with more than she came with, I will tell you what I know. It is not about revenge. I never wanted revenge. Revenge is loud, and loud was never my gift. My gift was always the quiet thing, the listening, the single true note held steady in a room full of people pretending. Sometimes the woman they told to be silent is the one who owns the floor beneath their feet. Sometimes love has to grow teeth to keep from being devoured. And sometimes a house, if you are patient, if you are quiet, if you refuse to swallow your own voice one day longer, will finally remember whose name it was always meant to carry. If this story stayed with you, if you know a woman who was taught to make herself small, share it with her. Let her hear it. Let her remember that the voice they told her to lose was never lost at all. It was only waiting the way a boat waits for the harbor in the dark to be done.